Anese Cavanaugh here with me live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Take two, by the way.
Take two.
The air conditioning was too loud. That's okay. We got that fixed. You came in from Sacramento, California. You got in 2 a.m. in the morning, Monday morning, I guess it would be. Were you freezing when you arrived?
No.
No? Okay.
No, a little chillier. I always forget every time I come out here. You would think I would know by now. Every time I come out here, I come out dressed for California. I get off the plane. I go, oh, it's 40. Right. So it was a little chilly, but it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So
the fall
I appreciate
colors
it.
alive and well.
Yeah.
We are in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are at Zing Train, which is Zingerman's Community of Business, their training facility where they train companies from all over the world. And you are one of the people that oftentimes is doing a workshop here. How cool.
Yeah.
So before we get started, I always ask my guests how they get themselves set up in the morning. And for those that know me at this point, they know that my way of getting set up each morning is to do nothing. Yeah. And that's my meditation practice, which I do for 45 minutes. And it kind of gets me settled and ready for the day. But what's Anese's version of do nothing?
Well, my version of do nothing, it depends on where I'm at in my life. So it's usually a combination of things. So I don't snooze very intentionally, but I use my 9-minute snooze to do what I call a body check. So my alarm goes off, I lay in bed, and I just check in with how I'm feeling. That's it. I do nothing for that first 9 minutes. I just check in. How am I feeling? How's my body feeling? If there was something I was thinking about the night before or trying to figure out, or a problem I'm trying to solve, I'll kind of check in with how do I feel about that. Those 9 minutes are usually when I do any kind of an emotional check or a vulnerability check or a vulnerability hangover check. If you have that dinner meeting or that conversation, and then I wake up and I'll go, how do I feel about that? Mm-hmm. And the feeling I'm looking for is total peace and congruency. So that's my 9 minutes. I'll notice during that time if there's anything that needs extra attention. So if there's any soreness in my body, or if I'm feeling tired, or if there's just, I pretty much use that 9 minutes to be in relationship with my body and just asking it, what does it need for today? Then after my 9 minutes, what I'll usually do is plug in some kind of gamma brainwaves or something into my ears, and I'll just lay there for a little bit longer. If I've got a lot of time, I'll do it for up to an hour. If I don't, I go at least 15 minutes, and I just do that to kind of settle in more deeply. And then I set my intentions. Mm-hmm. So I'll set my intentions, and I'll go through, the 5 steps to intentional impact that I use. So I'll go through, what do I want to create today? How do I want to feel? How do I want to show up? What do I want to believe? And then what do I want to do? And I just kind of scan through it quickly, and then I'll get up. And depending on where I'm at and my mood and how much time I have and how much TLC I'm feeling like I might need, I will grab a journal and I'll capture anything that came up. Mm-hmm. Or I'll read a little bit of something that I'm finding inspiring at that point in my life. And then I get up, and I don't talk to anybody before that time. Like that first 30 minutes, hour, whatever it turns out to be, I call it my sacred space. And nobody gets into that. My phone, my texts, nothing gets into that time. And then once I'm up and I've had my coffee, brushed my teeth, done whatever morning movement I might be doing, like dance or whatever I feel like, then I own my day. And then I jump into my day and I'll look at everything.
Okay, I have to change my system.
Oh, why?
That's a great morning.
Oh,
wow.
I love my mornings.
Fantastic.
I adore mornings.
When you do the 9 minutes and you're feeling into your body, into your emotions, let's say it feels off. How do you adjust already? Like, what are some of the things you carry over to adjust? Why is that funny?
Because I love talking to you, because there's no simple question. Sorry, I'm appreciating your questions.
That's great.
So if I'm noticing that something's off, my first step is to just acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. And let's just say I'm feeling really tender or I'm feeling really sensitive about something. It's just to acknowledge the emotion around it. And that's it. Because I find for me, as long as I give myself permission that often is enough to kind of start to clear that energy. So then I'm in a different state and I can decide what I'm going to do about it. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's the same thing for my body, where if something feels off with my body, then I ask my body, okay, what do you need? And my body will tell me. So like this morning I woke up and I was like, what do you need, body? My body was like, soup, soup. Which we all know we've been talking about soup. Yeah. So that's kind of it. I get curious. I allow for it. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge it. I don't make it wrong. Like there was a time that I would go, oh my gosh, you don't feel like that. Like get up, let's get going. Got to hustle, get going. You got a lot of stuff to do today. And I would force myself through it. And what I found is that really hurt me more than it helped me. Mm-hmm. And so the more space I can create for myself, that first thing in the morning, the more space I have for myself all day long, which means then I have more space for everybody else.
Let's just say you have a jam-packed day.
Yeah.
And you go through the process and you know you're feeling tender or edgy or whatever it might be. And now it's like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and everything's been coming at you, mm-hmm. and you're dealing with, somebody on your team or mm-hmm. whatnot, or a client, and they're coming at you. Mm. How are you able to draw on that morning experience to help you at that moment?
Well, I know for sure when I don't give myself that morning experience, that 3:30 experience that you're talking about, I am a way worse human being. So if I don't honor that need in the morning, when the afternoon comes, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and everything's coming at me, I'm not as good at holding my space. And so, doing that, I know gives me a lot more strength for holding my own, what I think of as my own energetic field or my bubble. And then when stuff is coming at me, I just remember, and I know you've seen this before, the bubble up exercise, where I literally imagine that I have, or not imagine, like I do, I have this energetic space all the way around me, and it's the space that is mine. And as long as I can remember that and stay present and keep breathing, then no matter how many things are coming at me, I'm a little bit more at choice, or a lot more at choice about how I want to interact with them. Mm-hmm. And so that to me just creates so much more space. Mm-hmm. And to me, any afternoon that you're talking about, the 3:30, 4 o'clock you just mentioned, that always boils down to how present can I be right now? How much space can I hold for myself? And how do I want to choose to be in relationship with whatever is coming up?
Mm-hmm. So it's that moment between stimulus and response. Mm-hmm. And that's that moment where you have a choice at 3:30 when your team member said something and got you and you're about to, but you have your bubble.
I have my bubble. Yeah. I have my bubble. And mm-hmm. And what I've learned for myself is that if the more well-rested I am, the more I've created that space in the morning, the better my food, my hydration, like all those things, the more I've honored that for myself, the more easy it is to pull that bubble up in an instant. Mm-hmm. If that's not happening, my resource state is not as strong, and so I'm more likely to react or to...
Will you ever just own it? Like at 3:30, would you just say, you know what, I'm like off today? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I had dinner with someone last night, and I knew I was really tired. Mm-hmm. And we'd had, I came in and I, had just like really beautiful things yesterday. I got to see a bunch of people. I was over at the Roadhouse. I saw Ari. The book showed up. I had some meetings. It was a really rich day. Mm-hmm. And then I had this dinner meeting last night, and I had specifically requested we have it at 5 o'clock because I knew I'd be on different time zones. I wasn't sure how travel would go. And so I knew at 5 o'clock I was ready for a nap, but I didn't have a nap. And so at dinner, the person I was with, she asked me something that was really, that was a sensitive topic. And my answer, from a leadership standpoint, I knew was going to have a lot of impact. And so what I said to her was, I love this question. I want to answer this question tomorrow after I've gotten a really good night's sleep. And I've thought about this because the answer to this question is going to set the direction for what you're talking about, and I want to be really responsible about that. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and she went, oh my God, thank you for pausing. Mm-hmm. Because the default would be to want to answer it immediately, but I could feel, there was a feeling in my body where I went, like Danger Will Robbins, like there's, or whoever, what did they say? Who's the Danger Will?
Oh, from Batman?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
There's some show.
Okay.
My kids watching some cartoon is just coming back, but I knew that whatever I said was going to have impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that I wasn't clear enough in my energetic state to give an answer that would be the best. So that's one example of that. And then there have been times, Rob, when my team, like we joke about it now, but I've sent a couple notes out, especially in the last 6 months, that basically say at like 2:00 in the afternoon, hey guys, I appreciate everything you're doing. I'm realizing I am not fit to lead today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a time out and go take care of myself. I'll be back in the morning with bells and boots on and we'll figure this out.
Okay.
And it's stopping in that moment before I react. And I think that every time I find some new edge for me and some new trick to bubble up and reboot and everything, the need for even better awareness starts to unfold.
What kind of feedback would you give to somebody who can't just stop at 2:00 and go take care of themselves?
Yeah.
And I want to ask you what taking care of yourself means, but
Yeah.
but before you answer that part, for somebody who maybe maybe they're a customer service
Yeah,
person,
for sure.
And what do? They have to be at their desk and
Yeah.
answer the phone and get through it.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, because I'm realizing I'm like, well, how lovely that I got to go take off at 2:00 and go take care of myself.
Yeah.
So that's kind of in a perfect world, and I know that is not the norm. I know for me, there are times all the time when I've got to go in and lead a session or do an interview or speak or whatever, and I would prefer to go like take a nap, or to go have a temper tantrum or whatever. And that luxury is not there. And so in that case, the feedback I would give or the offering I would give is around doing a presence reboot. And really, to me, it always comes down to the breath. Really in that moment, okay, it's 2:00, you got your next customer service call, you've got your next staff meeting, like whatever's happening for you, go and like get a minute, even if you can get a minute to just go take a deep breath and really breathe and connect with your body and even remember that you have your own energetic space. That in itself can be enough to get you to the next moment without falling apart. And so continuing to, I just call it a presence reboot, continue to reboot over and over and over again. I think that's incredibly useful. I think that the better we take care of ourselves in the cracks before we even get to that point, the easier it is to access a different state. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece I would offer there is, in the IEP work we do a thing called the energetic xylophone, which is, all of us have different energetic states and different emotions that associate, so if I'm in a state of blame, the energy that I'm going to put out, you're going to feel that. And that's a lower level vibration energy, not effective to lead from. But for me to go from a state of blame or fear or frustration or anger or judgment or wherever I'm at, for me to go from there to authentically going to like, hey, Rob, everything's great. Let's just bubble up and reboot and we're going to be good. It's super inauthentic and you are going to feel it and instantly you're not going to trust me. Even if you don't understand what's happening, you're going to know on some level there's something about this woman that is incongruent. Yeah. I'm not buying it. Mm-hmm. So the trick is not to go from, let's just say a level of a 3 to a 10. The trick is to go to the next highest authentic state you can get to, genuinely. Mm-hmm. So for me, I know at that 2:00, I can't go take a nap. Well, I know that I can always access curiosity. I know that's a pretty easy state. That's a higher level vibration for me. I can access curiosity. I can access gratitude. I can also access service. So if I can tap into any one of those 3 feelings in my body or those intentions, that's a way for me at 2:00 to shift gears authentically without being able to go take a nap.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice.
Here's one more thing I just want to say about that is that once I've shifted gears, so once I've gotten authentically to let's say I'm at a 3, then I get to a 5 or a 6. Once I genuinely have gotten there and I can be with my team in that energy, it's really easy for me to shift higher organically because I'm present with you. So whatever was happening before, like that's not actually happening. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, I do need to go take care of whatever it was that had me at a 3 or a 4.
Mm-hmm. Do they ever have trouble keeping up with you?
Who, my team?
Anybody.
No, know. I think everyone does a really good job. I think,
these levels,
the levels,
to be able to access them, that takes years
Yeah,
and years of
it
practice.
is.
And for so many people, what you're talking about, it's hard to conceptualize until
Yeah.
you start practicing it and getting really in tune with all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's life's work.
Yeah.
I think it is life's work. I think that, it's funny because I've been leading this work for almost 20 years now. And the joke is that the more I lead the work and the more I dive into it, the more I realize I don't know anything. And the more I realize there's so much more work for me to do. And I can feel, I'm more sensitive now to the littlest of nuances in terms of my tone and how I'm showing up and what's happening with my team. And so it's kind of like where ignorance is bliss, before, because now I don't have that ignorance. I'm painfully aware of it, but I'm committed to continuing to get better and better at it. And so I think that like where any of us are on our xylophone or in our process around doing nothing or whatever, I think we're at the perfect place. And really the trick is, what's our awareness? And are we devoted to the lifelong journey of continuing to create more space for ourselves so we can have more range for the people we lead? And I'll just say, my team does not have a hard time keeping up with me. They're phenomenal. I do move really fast, and it can be one of my leadership fails when I'm moving too fast and I leave people behind. So that's something we all work on together.
You mentioned after the 9 minutes, you put earphones in and do gamma waves. Explain what that means.
Okay. All right. So I got turned on to this thing called Holosync a couple years ago. Are you familiar with that?
No.
You would actually probably really dig it. So it's these waves. I am actually not going to insult science by trying to define all the different waves, but there's all these different brain waves. And the Holosync stuff, or the audio, you put it in, and you get 30 minutes of bells and water and just really beautiful. And it puts your brain in a different state so that it helps you wake up and be even more in tune and aware. And I really love that. And so the bottom line of it is that I switched my phone, and I can't, for some reason, it's not compatible anymore. And so I haven't been able to upload it. And so what I've been doing instead is I found gamma waves on the internet, and I listened to those instead.
Okay.
But the point, I mean, it's silly, but it's true. Like, that's the reason why I'm not listening to Holosync anymore, is because I can't download it. So I don't know. But,
Hey, Holosync people.
hey, Holosync people, like, help me out.
Get with the new phone.
And I'm actually really happy about what I'm doing, because it's having me find different audios to listen to, and I find that the different audios create a different feeling for me. So with some of them, I automatically wake up, or I automatically come out of that 15 minutes later, and I feel ready to rock and roll. And with some of them, I want to go back to sleep. And so it's new for me. I'm not familiar enough with all the science to explain it, but it's something that intuitively I'm drawn to right now that I've been having a fun time playing with.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You said after all this you have coffee. I know you have this bullet coffee, right? Did I say that right? Bullet coffee? Bulletproof coffee. Yeah. What's the deal with that?
Okay, so Bulletproof Coffee is, I'm sure people listening to this are going to know it.
Okay.
I feel like it's going to take over the world.
It is. Okay.
It is, right? It's basically, it's a blend of your coffee with brain octane oil, which is MCT oil, which is like coconut oil, but even stronger, better, clearer for your brain.
Okay.
And then mixed with either ghee or unsalted grass-fed butter.
Okay.
And I have that first thing in the morning. And then what it does for me is first of all, it's delicious, and it's like my morning treat. But second of all, it just keeps me steady throughout the day. So I'm really not hungry until about 11 or 12 o'clock.
I see.
It keeps like my brain fog. I don't have brain fog. I think really clearly. I'm ready to rock and roll. And it's become a part of my ritual for the last, I would say, almost 5 years now, where I'm like Pavlov's dog. The alarm goes off and I go, okay, where's my coffee? I can smell it cooking downstairs. And I'm literally, through that 9 minutes, I'm laying there going, okay, or through that first part, I'm laying there going, okay, I'm ready to get my coffee.
How does it start cooking on its own?
Oh, I have a timer.
But with the butter and all that? Or
Oh, no. That's the ritual. So,
okay.
oh my gosh, that's okay. Dave Asprey, that's a good trick for him to figure out how to do an automatic download for the Bulletproof that actually comes to
I
you
thought
and brings
maybe you
it
had
in
a
your
special
room.
machine or something.
Oh no,
Yeah.
but we should invent it.
There you go.
No, it's part of the ritual. So the coffee is made, and then I put the butter or the ghee. I'm really into Madagascar ghee right now. Madagascar vanilla ghee. It's really good. And I put that in, and then I put some brain octane in it, and then you blend it.
Okay.
And you get it really, really frothy.
Okay.
And then
Got it.
it's
So
delicious.
Okay. So could you ever have imagined that, you'd be doing this kind of work when you were younger? Like when you were growing up, what kind of jobs were you imagining that you would do?
Well, I'm laughing because, so my mom a couple of years ago sent me this laminated book that I wrote when I was in 5th grade. And it was really sweet. It's like one of the nicest things she's ever done for me. She sent me this book. And she said, Anese, because that was my nickname, or is my nickname, I saved this for you. I thought you'd want this someday. Mm-hmm. And basically, as a 5th grader, I wrote a vision. I didn't know what visioning was then, but I wrote a vision, and it spoke to what I was doing with my life, who I hung out with, where I lived, what kind of a car I drove, the kind of work that I did, and in 5th grade, what I said I would be doing is I said that I would be working in a very tall building with a corner office, driving a Ferrari, because I think every 5th grader wants to drive a Ferrari. I'm not sure, but that was, and I actually wouldn't even want a Ferrari, but for some reason in 5th grade, I wanted the Ferrari. Mm-hmm. But I also said I would be writing. When I was in 5th grade, I said I would be writing, and I would be writing books, and I said I would be helping people. But I didn't say what I would be doing. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. So I thought that was really cute. She sent it to me, and I'd drawn pictures, and I'd drawn the high-rise building. And it's funny because I actually have done all that. I have worked in the high-rise, and I have had the big office in the corner, and I just didn't stay with it.
Uh-huh. Okay. So do you remember writing that?
Vaguely.
Okay.
Vaguely. It was a school project.
It was a school project.
A school project.
Okay.
Yeah, it was done at school.
So at school, they were asking you to write out a vision for your future?
Yeah. I don't remember them calling it a vision, but I think, they were saying
What's your life look like?
What are you going to do with your life? Yeah. Which I am so grateful for that. I don't know, my daughter's in 8th grade now. My son's a senior. I actually don't know if they have them do that anymore. I should know that, but I'm really grateful.
They didn't do it
at
at my kids' school.
Yeah, I don't now. This is the first time I haven't thought about this in years, but I don't think that they do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. They should.
They should. I got a text to do after this talk.
Having kids write a vision is pretty powerful.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it starts moving them in a direction or getting them thinking about that sort of thing in the future. Why do you think you were writing about being in a high-rise, having a Ferrari? To me, what I start to think about are the finer things in life.
Yeah.
And were you, was that something maybe you didn't have as much of as you wanted, or at all, or what was that like?
I don't know. It's such a good question because I can't. I don't want to work in a high-rise now or have a Ferrari, so I don't know. I have to think that I probably got that idea from, that light just went off. Does that matter?
It's okay.
Okay.
It's
Are we
fine.
good?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to think that I got that idea from just TV or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there was no pull I want to have a Ferrari. There was no pull I want to make a ton of money. I was never motivated by money. I actually didn't start really thinking about making money until about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So, but there was something about finer things. I mean, there's a representation there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the Ferrari.
No, it's not. I think I made up a story in my head.
Yeah.
And I don't know this to be true, but I think I made up a story. My intuition tells me I made up a story in my head that said that if you did those things, you would have resources to do more. You would have resources to help more people. You'd have resources to, I knew I wanted to write, but how would I write? I'd have to have resources to write. So I'm making this up, but my feeling in my gut right now is that it had something to do with, well, if I lived in a high-rise building and worked in one, and I had a Ferrari, then clearly I would be well established enough that I could be doing whatever I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
I make up that there was a connection there for me around freedom.
Why do you think at 5th grade you knew you wanted to be a writer?
I don't know.
I mean, what is a writer to
I
a
don't know.
fifth grader?
I don't know.
Like, were there books that you thought, wow, I'd like to write a book like this?
I don't know. I know that I loved to make things. So in my house right now, I have my first pictures that I ever drew that I put together, and I sold them to my parents. And one was for 50 cents, and you can see in the corner I put 50 cents, and I put 50 and then a cent sign on each picture. And then I gave the first one to my parents. I said, sure, we'll buy it for 50 cents. And I went, well, that was too easy. And so then I marked the next one up to $1. And so they're in my house right now. They're hanging by my children's rooms, my quickly growing children's rooms.
Yes, right.
They're hanging in the hallway. And I remember the feeling of making something. And then my mom went and she got it framed. And there was a blue frame and there was a pink frame. It was just really beautifully done. But she got it framed for me. And I was like, God, that felt really good to make something. So I don't know where the writing came in. I really don't.
Would you journal or something?
I journaled. I did. I journaled.
Writing stories?
I did, actually. I journaled, and I always had one of those little journals that had the keys that locked it, that were completely flimsy, but that were very important. And so I journaled, and then I did write stories. I can remember writing stories on that lined paper with the dashes and then stapling it together, and I would make mini books.
Okay. There you go.
So I guess...
You were a publisher as well.
I guess I was a publisher back then. I guess I was. I mean, these are fun questions, Rob. Of course you're asking me these questions because I literally have not thought about that in years.
And you were the oldest of 4 siblings?
Yeah.
And all girls?
All girls.
Wow. And what are your age differences?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, is that putting you on the spot?
No, I'm just not going to remember exactly. So I think my next sister down is 3 years younger than me. The next one down is 5 years younger than me, 5 or 6. And then the next one down is about 7 years younger. We're about 2 to 3 years apart, each of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these are all your blood siblings. It is not a modern family at this point or anything of that. Like I had a modern family.
No, there's other siblings, but they didn't come into the picture until, oh gosh, I was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So there were a couple more that when my family split up, they went and had a different set of kids. But we didn't all meet until literally what is today? 2018, 2011, I think. So
All the
extras,
modern family.
all the modern family, yeah, all the extras.
They all
we
finally
didn't.
met 7 years ago.
Right.
Okay.
But the 4 of us growing up, we are like this. Like
All 4 of you are
all
tight.
4 of us are super,
Really?
even to
Do
this
you
day.
all live in the same area or?
Kind of, yeah. We live. 2 sisters live. We live within 20 minutes of each other, and then the other one lives up in Chico, so she's about an hour and a half, 2 hours away,
Okay.
and we're super close. I mean, we talk to each other. I talk to at least one of my sisters every single day.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, we're like close.
Uh-huh. And so 5th grade, everybody, all the girls were in the picture at this point, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were you like as you started to grow up and get into middle school and high school? Those kind of influential times.
Yeah.
You know, were you strong?
Yeah.
Were you confused? Or or were you freewheeling, happy?
The 2 words that come up for me are I was incredibly shy.
Oh.
And I was incredibly bossy.
Okay.
That's a good combination,
Yeah,
right?
it's an interesting combo.
So yeah, I was incredibly shy. I just gave a keynote in education a couple months ago, and I went through and I found, I'll have to show these to you offline, but I went through and I found some school pictures that tracked me from kindergarten to 2nd grade to 4th grade to high school, basically. And to see the evolution of me as a little girl was just so interesting, because my kindergarten pictures were like this. I was so shy. In fact, I was so shy that in kindergarten, they called my parents in and said, we don't know if she's going to make it in the real world because she is so shy and she is so sensitive to what is happening with other kids that we're worried about her. And so I actually grew up for a long time thinking that sensitivity, empathy, that was a bad thing. And that continued. And you can see that in the pictures. You can see really, really shy. And then in the next grade, I look a little bit happier. And then you see in the next grade, I look really, really shy. And in fourth grade, I remember going and speaking I wanted to be the class treasurer, which is hilarious because that's all logistics and analysis, and I would fall apart doing that now.
They had that in fourth grade.
They
in your
did.
School.
They had a whole thing. So I was working on coming out of my shyness. Like I knew like it's bad. It's what I made up was I was like, it's bad to be shy. I got to get out there, and I really wanted to be class treasurer. So I put together this huge campaign. And I remember we stole the slogan from McDonald's, "I'll do it all for you," and we had like drawn posters around the school with like the Big Mac, and anyway, and I went to speak to give my little talk, and I was so shy that I literally had like one or two really good little friends, and when I got up on stage, Rob, I started to give my little talk, and the night before I had been so nervous for my little talk that I had taken a shower and washed my hair and taken a bath and bathed in baby oil so that when I got up the next morning, my hair was so oily. It was baby oil, right? And we couldn't get it out. So I went to school. I had my brand new pink outfit on. I had my black patent leather Mary Janes and my really oily hair and my little bow tie. And I got up to give my talk. And I started to talk, and the kids started to boo me. And they started to go, "Get off the stage." And, they called me Anese. So at that time, they had named me as Nessie the Loch Ness Monster, which was brutal. And so I'm sitting on stage, and I kept giving my talk. Like I can remember, I can still, even as I'm telling this, my heart starts to beat faster because I can still remember being that little fourth grader. And I kept giving my talk, and they were booing and booing. And then finally, like I got off stage, and the teachers told them to settle down, and that was it. And I was mortified. And as I was walking off the stage, I said, I will never get in front of people again. I will never speak in front of people again, ever. And later that day, a teacher came up to me and he said, "Hey, Anese, I saw your talk earlier. You have a really big voice and it's really important. Don't ever let anybody tell you differently." And that teacher, I think he's part of the reason why we're having this conversation.
What's his name?
Mr. Purdy.
Mr. Purdy?
Mr. Purdy.
You ever contacted Mr. Purdy?
Later, yeah. We stayed in touch for a long time.
No kidding.
Yeah.
In your adult life?
Not as an adult. I don't know where he is now as an adult.
I wonder where he is.
But
how old do you think he is?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that. That was a really big
impactful.
Deal. Really big, really impactful.
Isn't it funny how, at such a young age, for any of us, an adult like that can just pull you aside and say something that literally took 2 minutes for him to say it or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah.
And it stuck with you.
It stuck with me forever. And how easy it would have been for him to just think it and not say it and just figure out she'll get it. I'm busy. I got to go get to my papers or whatever. I mean, it would have been so easy for him. But again, I got goosebumps all over my body because I can remember going, "Oh yeah, I do have a big voice."
Mm-hmm.
And then you see in those pictures, you start to see in fourth grade, I start to come out of my shell a little bit more. And then by fifth grade, I'm writing a vision. And then we kept going. So if you ask my sisters or anybody in my family that knew me really closely, or if you see pictures from when we were little, with my closest people, I was super bossy, super commanding, let's do this. I was not shy. Out in the public with the rest of the world, I was incredibly shy. Mm-hmm. And then that really started to change. I would say I really started to come out of my shell when I was about 13, 14, 15 years old.
So you weren't shy at home? It was just
not shy
outside.
at home.
Okay.
It was just out in the world.
Okay. And when you say you came out of your shell 13, 14, what started to happen?
Well, let's see. So my parents split up, and when they
How old
split,
were you?
I was 13.
Okay.
So when they split up, you learn. I was the oldest of four, and you just learn a lot. When there's such a big shift in family, you learn a lot. And I can remember when I was 14 going and getting a job. I actually went and we needed, my mom was now raising 4 little girls. Dad was out of the picture, and I needed a job. We needed to pay the rent. And so I remember I went to Baskin-Robbins. And the rule was you couldn't work until you were 15 years old, and you needed a special work permit. But I really needed a job. So I went into Baskin-Robbins, and I said, I did my little interview, And then at the very end, I remember the guy who interviewed me, he goes, okay, Anese, well, is there anything else you'd like me to know? And I was sitting there and I had that feeling in my body that I know when it's like, I'm not being honest about this, like I'm incongruent, and, but I didn't know that that's what it was. I just knew I felt the ick. And so I said, yes, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to let you know I lied. I'm not actually 15, I'm only 14. But I just figured if you met me, I could get my foot in the door and maybe we could figure something out. And he goes, oh, okay, good. Very interesting. Thank you for telling me that. And he wrote something down and I went, oh, I blew it. And I left. And I went home and I was so bummed out because I thought for sure, like, that was the end of my Baskin Robbins career. And a couple days later, he called me. His wife actually called me and she said, okay, we're going to give you the job. And the reason why we're giving you the job is because you have integrity. You told us the truth about your age. And I went, oh, okay, awesome. And I literally had to go look up what integrity meant because I didn't know what integrity was, but I just knew I was really excited that I had it. And so that was kind of a moment. Like there was little moments, like coming out of the shell, there was little moments like the family changes form. That's stressful at 13. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of also just navigating the emotions that go with that. So then there's kind of like, you kind of got to come out of your shell to just start to be in that differently, I think. I think that was a big part of it. And then going and getting a job, that was another thing that had me go, well, I've got to actually get out there and start leaning into stuff that would be like, that's terrifying to go ask for a job. And then the integrity thing, like it just kept one thing after, like one step led to the next. And then before you knew it, like I'm still shy. I mean, believe it or not, I still actually am incredibly shy. I just am better now at going, oh, I feel shy or I feel intimidated by this. So I lean into it and I do that really quickly. So.
When your parents split up,
Yeah.
did they call the girls into a meeting or like what was the circumstance? I remember I was 8 when my parents split up and they called us my sister and I into the living room and they just kind of explained what was going on and I didn't really understand it.
You're right.
I was 8.
Yeah.
So I just, once they were done, I wanted to go outside and go play, but I'm always curious what...
Were you the oldest?
Yeah, and I still am.
And you still are the oldest. What? That's still?
But yeah, I'm always curious, like what, like if, and do you remember kind of the moment when you realize we're not all together anymore?
Yeah, I do. We actually weren't together for it. So what had happened was we had moved to Colorado and my mom had left to come back to California, but we weren't sure why. We just thought she was coming back to see family. The way that I found out about them getting divorced was I overheard a phone call. But then, you know, when I asked about, like, they didn't want us to know, they were trying to protect us. So basically, I kind of had a feeling that it was happening a couple months before they actually told us. And when they told us, they didn't tell us together. We actually flew out to California to be with my mom. And then Dad went and he went and did his thing. And then when we got to California, my mom told us that they'd split up.
I see.
So that was it. So there was no, it wasn't like that, you know, contained environment. It was just kind of, this has happened. We're no longer married, or we're not going to be married anymore. We live in California now. Okay,
so when you moved to Colorado, prior to that, you were in Sacramento area or California?
I grew up in the Bay Area. So I grew up in Cupertino.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to go on field trips to Apple before Apple was
Apple. Okay.
Yeah. I grew up in Cupertino. So we moved from Cupertino to Colorado.
Yeah.
And we lived there for a year.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was in 7th grade.
7th grade.
I was 7th grade.
And when did they call you in and say, girls, we're moving to Colorado?
Yes.
Yeah, and how was that? Was everyone excited?
That was exciting.
Oh,
yeah,
it was?
That was cool. That was cool.
Okay.
Well, it was like a combination. So, I mean, so I grew up in the mountains, and so we had a lot of rattlesnakes. And so when they said we're moving to Colorado, my first thought was, oh, sweet. We're not gonna have rattlesnakes anymore. So like literally that was what I was excited about.
It's great.
Like I don't have to worry about rattlesnakes anymore. This is really cool, you know? And I was sad about leaving friends, but I don't remember it being that big of a deal. And it was kind of like, well, Colorado has the Garden of the Gods and there's hiking there and it's like, it's so pretty. And, you know, so I was up for an adventure.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Did your sisters feel the same way?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were younger, so they may not have been quite as established in the friend department.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think, like, to give my parents credit, like, I really think that they probably did a really beautiful job of communicating and moving us out there because it didn't, like, sitting here thinking about it, I don't remember it being hard. I don't remember being upset about it. I remember thinking it was like more of an adventure.
Okay. Was it a job move or what?
It was a job move for my dad. Yeah.
Okay.
My dad. Yeah.
And what part of Colorado did you move to?
Colorado Springs.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
It was
And
really
and you
great.
were there just a short period of time,
A
and
year.
then your mom all of a sudden left.
Yeah.
Did she call you all in and say, "Hey, I'm going back to California. You guys are going to be here with your dad for a while"?
I don't remember, but probably.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it was, we were there for we lived there for, I think, just under a year. And the impression I remember having was that she was going back to take care of some family stuff. And that she had to go back. But we were so in school. My great aunt came to stay with us to help us out.
I see.
So we were super into our, plus, oh, by the way, it's important to say, I was a 13-year-old teenage girl, so I was incredibly self-absorbed. Like, I don't think that I was probably trying to figure out what was happening. And so she left, and I think she probably came back to kind of start taking care of some business and figuring out what, I think it was actually probably a separation, and they were just trying to figure out what they were going to do, and then they decided.
And this is all in retrospect,
Yeah,
and
this is
you're
retrospect.
you're guessing.
Yeah,
You don't
it's all
even know.
guessing. There wasn't communication about it.
I see.
There wasn't communication.
But then at some point you got a message or a call where you were told you are now going to California to be
Yes.
with your mom.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And
yes.
what was that okay, or how did that feel?
that was not
that was a
okay.
different reaction.
That was like, wait, what? Because
Yeah.
we were going to be with her, but then we found out he wasn't coming, and
Yeah.
so that was like, well, that's confusing,
Yeah.
you know. And so when we got out there, I remember it starting to come together a little bit more clear, like, okay, this makes sense. And then I'd also overheard a conversation that was pretty clear that they were not gonna stay together, and so, you know, it was a really confusing time.
Yeah,
I
I
think
bet.
it was a really confusing time, and I know that they both handled it the very best they could.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I've learned nothing else as a parent, has been that sometimes when we try and protect our kids from communicating things with them, it backfires.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think the lack of communication was not to like keep it from us or to have anything be more difficult than it already was. I think it was really in service of trying to kind of do it smoothly and keep the kids focused on school and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So did you end up back in the same school system?
No.
Okay.
No. We moved from there. We went and stayed with my other great aunt who lived in Menlo Park, who was darling, and we lived with her for a little while. And then we moved back to Cupertino. And by that point, I was, I would have been 8th grade and then going into high school. And so I went to high school in Cupertino. And then my senior year in high school, we moved to Pleasanton. And I finished out school in Pleasanton. And then I moved out.
Mm-hmm. What were the emotions you had through high school with the moving around and all that?
I was pissed. I was pissed.
So
I was a little mad.
what were you like? Were you a moper? Were you a
No.
don't talk to me mom? Or were you
No.
a yeller?
No, I was independent.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Okay.
I
You
got
just
really
went off and
independent.
did your own things?
Yeah, I remember at one point going, oh yeah, well, I'm going to show you. I'm just going to dig in and get really good grades and not have a social life, and that's how I'm going to show you. Which now I'm like, oh my God, what a
She
dream
was so
kid,
excited.
right?
Yeah.
No, I would say especially for I think my 8th and 9th grade, especially, I was irritated. I was sad, and I was mad, and I felt really frustrated because I was working, and all my friends were doing sports, and so and I was babysitting, and then at the same time, my mom was out there trying to like provide for 4 kids now, like, so there was a lot of like, and where it changed for me was when I was working at Baskin-Robbins, and I was scooping world-class chocolate. I was in the freezer, and I was scooping out ice cream, and I was working on New Year's Day, and I remember being really pissed off about that because it was like, it's New Year's Day. I want to be with my friends. And this guy had ordered his ice cream, and I was scooping, and I'm in the freezer, and it was a double scoop, and all of a sudden the thought occurs to me, like, Anese, what if you don't have to be miserable, basically? Like, what if you don't have to be pissed off about this? What if this thing happening with your family didn't happen to you, but it's actually happening for you? And what if you actually get to create a really great life now? Like, what if this is just going to make you stronger? And all of this went through my head as I'm scooping this. And I can remember the feeling in my body, which I think is my first connection with intention or decision, Because I remember coming out of that freezer and going, oh, you know what? I'm going to actually create a really great life.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that I gave the ice cream to, he gave me a $5 bill for my tip. And I went, it's an angel wink.
That's a big
really
tip,
supposed to
even these
happen.
days.
Oh my gosh, right? $5 for an ice cream.
Yeah.
But I remember it started to change then, because then I started to get, that would have been freshman year, then I started to get more devoted around, okay, well, what do I want to create with my life?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was still teenager irritated. Like, it's hard for me to separate what's normal teenager stuff versus what's, you know.
Well,
what I mean?
I'll tell you what I think is not normal,
What?
and those are the thoughts that you were having when you were scooping the or the world-class chocolate. Were you reading things, or like where was this coming from? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I have. I honestly think that came from like God
Uh-huh.
and angels. I
Were
think
you
that
guys
was,
religious growing up?
We were religious until my parents split up, and then when they split up, we stopped going to church.
I see.
And so I had a relationship with God. Like I had a relationship for sure. I also, after they split up, I also decided that I didn't need organized religion to have a really beautiful relationship. And so now when I think about it, I've got my relationship with God and my spiritual advisory board and angels and Buddha and like everything, anything goes. But I think that in that moment, what was informing me, because I can remember, my intuition always speaks to me from back here. I can, like right now, it just comes through me like this. And I can remember feeling in my body, and where that message came from was back here. So I think that was spirit, my spiritual advisory board going, hey, you've got this, like, you can choice point. You can either be pissed off and be miserable and get into a lot of trouble, because it was high school, there's definitely opportunities for trouble. Or you can like actually use this and do something really awesome with it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I always wonder where that comes from for young people. How do they innately have that sort of wisdom?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it comes from, I don't know where it comes from. I think my experience of it is it comes from spirit. You know, just whatever you believe in that's bigger than you. I just believe, no matter what anybody's religious beliefs are, or what they believe in, what supports them, I just believe that we're all in it together, and there is a collective biggerness that's bigger than all of us that helps give us wisdom and hope and guidance when we really, really need it. And I think that the more we're open to it and the more we allow ourselves to receive that, then the quicker we can move through pain.
When you were going through high school, were you dating? Were you in, like,
Yeah.
you were?
I was.
What kind of date were you?
What kind of a date was I?
Yeah.
I don't know. What qualify that question?
Well, it seems to me that you had a certain kind of wisdom.
Oh, yes.
You had moved around a lot, so you had probably some, as you mentioned, there's a little anger in there.
Yeah.
Your dad wasn't around,
Right.
so that was missing.
Yeah.
So I was just curious.
No, it's a really good question. So my freshman year, I was like I would call it a generic dater. Generic, just like, I'm just, so generic meaning like I went to the dance with Joey, or I went to Christmas ball with so-and-so, and I was just kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But I was also very well behaved. Like I wasn't a big drinker. Like I was very conscious about stuff. However, my sophomore year, I met a man. I hung out. So all my closest friends were a year ahead of me. They were all. This was a theme in my life. My friends have always been a little bit older than me, and we would all go to. My kids are going to probably see this at some point, but we would all go to.
They already know.
They already know. We would all go to fraternity parties at the local college.
That's
I was
great.
a sophomore.
Yeah.
And I was grounded. I was grounded for 80% of my sophomore, junior year. I was grounded all the time because I would break curfew. I got caught drinking a couple times. I was a good teenager. Like I was a good teen. And my sophomore year, do we need to do anything with that?
No.
Just keep going?
Okay.
My sophomore year, I met somebody who was in college, and I started dating him, and then I dated him for 4 more years.
Did he know that you were a sophomore in high school?
He did.
Oh, wow.
He did.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was wildly inappropriate.
Did you live near a college campus, obviously, if you were going to fraternity?
Yeah, I lived near Stanford.
Oh, near Stanford.
So
Okay.
I mean, at least we did Stanford parties. But but you know what's really funny is that I was grounded a lot, and I actually I think about this all the time with my kids now, because I was grounded a lot, and sometimes I was really grateful to be grounded, because there was always so many things to get into that could have gotten me into a lot of trouble, that I was grounded, so I never had to deal with the peer pressure around it. You know, or not peer pressure, but just the temptation. I shouldn't say peer pressure, but temptation.
Yeah.
So I ended up dating a guy who was just out of high school, who was older, and we were together. He was my first official boyfriend, and we were together for almost 4 years till after I was out of school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did your mom know that he was in college?
Mm-hmm.
What did she have to say about that?
Just to behave.
Okay.
Just to be smart.
Yeah, so she supported you, whether she agreed with it or not.
Yeah, kind of. I mean,
she knew you were going to do your thing.
Yeah, she knew it. She knew I was going to do her thing. I mean, I really, honestly, like in this, as you and I are talking about this, what strikes me is how incredibly independent I was.
Yeah.
I was pretty much, I was never into, I said earlier, I corrected peer pressure into temptation, because I was never a peer pressure person. I still am not. That doesn't really influence me, but I was very independent. So if you told me I couldn't do something, or you in any way tried to like confine me, then that was my cue to go, oh, really? Well, let's figure it out. So,
do you think you dated a guy from Stanford because you thought he might be successful someday?
he wasn't from Stanford.
Oh,
He actually
okay.
wasn't from Stanford. He
was he?
he was at another party that we went to after Stanford.
Okay. All right.
So,
Never mind that.
But you know what? But he was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And he actually had dropped out of school and had started his own business. And I think that's a lot of where I started to get introduced to the entrepreneurial bug of like, oh, that's really interesting. Like he's building this business. And so I think I got some of my entrepreneurial spirit from that. I appreciated his freedom. I think one of my core values and one of my themes of my life has been freedom. Freedom is super important to me. And so I can see where that would be a compelling person to spend time with. And I wasn't into like some of the traditional things that a lot of kids in high school are into. I was just kind of like, I was ready to get out. I was ready to get out of high school starting sophomore year.
You were ready to be an adult.
I was.
At a really early age.
I was.
Yeah.
I was. And I was working and I was making my own money. Like there was a lot.
Yeah.
I was the oldest of the 4 kids. I mean, there was a lot. I was ready to go. So.
Was there any question that you would go to college?
No, I always knew I would go to college.
So that was a given. Was that through the family? I mean, did all?
No.
Okay.
Well, my mom didn't go to school, and so my dad did, but my mom did not. And I actually knew from when I was little that I would just go to school. Like that's just what you
Sisters too? Did they feel the same way?
No, they had their own path with it, but I don't know actually how they felt with it, but I know for me, there was a not even
I'm doing
an
this
option.
to go to college. I'm going to high school,
you go to high school
because
and then
the
you
next
go to
step,
college, right? Like that's just, there's high school, and then there's college. So it's funny because I could have easily skipped high school in my mind, but college was happening no matter what. And so that was really important to me to do that. I wanted to do it. And I also, there was something about, I really wanted the college experience. And I don't know where that comes from, but I wanted the experience of like living on campus and, getting an internship. And the irony is, I mean, it's really funny. These are the things that I was thinking about. Like, I want to live on campus and I want to get an internship. And maybe I'll date a professor. I mean, like who knows? But no, I'm just kidding. But
I don't think you are.
I might have
I think
thought
you
that
were
thought.
thinking
I
that.
might have thought
Yeah.
that thought. Like maybe I'll
Yeah,
date a
you had a
professor.
vision.
There was a vision.
I see pattern. You always have a vision, and you start moving towards it. It may not always work out exactly as you wanted it to, but somewhere along the lines.
turns out.
So, what college did you end up going to?
Oh, I went to a bunch. I went to a junior college for a couple of years to kind of figure out what I was doing. Because I was also, I paid for college, so I put myself through.
Okay.
And so, I worked full time and I went to college. So all through college, I went junior high, and then I went to USF, University of San Francisco. And I went for 1 semester. And that semester, I said, okay, I'm going to have the full-on college experience. I'm not going to work. I am just going to go to school. I'm going to live close to campus. I'm going to have a roommate. Like, I was like, I'm having my college experience now, because I did my first couple of years at the JC and had worked full-time. And so it was like, that's just a very different experience of college. That's like college is on the side, and you're just getting it done, and you're not sleeping. And so when I got into USF, I thought I was going to go into sports medicine. I decided I was going to go all out. So I took out student loans, and I did it for one semester. And the irony of that semester is that I took 18 units, the most you could take at that time. And then I didn't work, and I got my roommate, and I was bored out of my mind. I was bored out of my mind. And so then I went and I got an internship. And they were like, well, we'll pay you some. And I was like, nope, can't be a paid internship. I'm doing an internship. And so I did that for 6 months. And I got straight A's. And it was great. However, I got my first statement at the end of that semester showing what I was gonna owe when I got out. And I remember looking at it and going, I am going to have to sell all my limbs when I get out of school in order to pay this off. I don't want to be in that much debt. Like, I don't want to do it. And so I actually ended up transferring out to, it's now called Cal State East Bay, but at the time it was called Cal State Hayward. And I moved over there, and I took a full load, and then I started working again. And then I worked, I remember there was a point when I was going to school there that I was working 3 different jobs and going to school full time, but that kept me going. Mm-hmm. My grades weren't as good as they were at USF, but I was very awake.
You were studying sports medicine. Mm-hmm. How did you stick with that? Is that
kind of? I moved from sports medicine at USF, and I went into, what did they call it? Kinesiology, and I started athletic training at Hayward. So I was doing athletic training, and I did that, and I was at the very end of the degree, and I remember I was working in the training room as part of my curriculum. And I remember this guy coming in, and he got up on the bench. He was like this huge football player, and he put out his feet, and he took off his shoes, and he had these hairy, linty toes, and he said, I need you to wrap my ankle for me. And I remember looking at him and going, this is not what I want to do with my whole life. Like, I don't want to wrap ankles forever. And so I wrapped his ankle, and then I went up to my administrator's office or my counselor's office, and I said, you got to get me out of this degree. I actually don't want this degree. This isn't what I want to do with my life. Switch me. So then he switched me over to clinical exercise, which is all about like cardiac rehab and getting people through their, cardiac interventions. And he switched me over there, so I ended up having enough units that I got a double. So I got athletic training and clinical exercise, and then I graduated.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And did you graduate with less student loans, or or did you still have to?
I only had to pay off USF. Mm-hmm. So when I got out, I just had It was only one. So because that bill, like, that is the gift of, I was so grateful I got that thing, because I only had to, life is happening. How's it going?
We're just going to lift this mic back.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Life is, we just keep going, right?
This is the way
this
we
is
roll.
life.
Yeah.
No big deal. How are you guys doing?
All set.
Okay. He's like, keep going,
Yeah,
stop
just
it.
keep going.
So when I got that statement, there was something that happened in my body with like the level of contraction and fear I felt around coming out of school with that times, I guess it would have been like 6 more semesters or something, that I pretty much made a decision that anything I was doing with school was going to be paid for regularly. Mm-hmm. So I bartended, I cocktailed, I taught group exercise, I did personal training, I worked at a sports medicine doctor's thing, I worked at a CPA's office, like I did anything, I worked at Target, like I did anything I could to make enough money to pay for my tuition every semester, or every quarter. So when I got out, I just had USF to pay off, which was great.
Where did you learn to be good with money? Who taught you that?
I didn't learn that. I did not learn that.
You didn't learn that.
I didn't learn that until I was totally an adult and married, actually.
Okay, well, let me go back for a second. Just something I'm picking up on, which is the when you saw how much University of San Francisco cost, and you didn't keep going down the road, like later on it'll all work itself out. Like somehow you went, whoa, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So somehow you got that mindset.
Yeah, it's
Where
true.
do you think that came from?
Well, I think that was fear driven. I think that was fear. I think I saw that bill, and I saw this future flash in front of my eyes where I was like, I'm going to be in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt.
Yeah.
And my life hasn't even started yet.
Yeah.
And it's totally scared
But
me.
most kids that age, well, I shouldn't say most, but many, maybe less so today because I think people are talking about it more, but back in your time, I think people just thought, well, this is what I do. I take out student loans, I get through school, then I'll pay them off over time, and it all take care of itself. And especially at a young age, if you haven't been taught, good stewardship with money, you just don't connect at all.
Yeah.
But you were.
But I was, well, and here's the thing. So it's kind of I'm probably going to contradict myself now, because I can remember growing up being around a lot of people that had some big financial problems.
Okay.
And seeing the stress that created for them, and watching the pain that created. And I can remember that feeling of fear of going, oh my gosh, I don't want to ever feel like that. And so I think that when I got that first statement and I felt that feeling, I went, I don't want that coming out of school. Now, that being said, I went through school, I paid it off every quarter, but by the time I got out of school, I still had debt. Like, I still had credit card debt. I still was like, living paycheck to paycheck. And I did that for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I actually really got good with money until I got married. And I was married to somebody who was amazing with money, who was like, this is, you got to pay attention to this, and why aren't you looking at this? And I learned a lot from him. Mm-hmm. So that grew me up a lot too. Mm-hmm.
So you were kind of in the health and wellness world, I guess, it seems.
Yeah, I was.
And so what did you end up doing when you got out of school, or what were some of the jobs?
Oh my gosh, I had the best jobs.
What were they?
So my first job out of college was to be the fitness director at a fitness retreat in Woodside, California. And so we would go, I worked 4 days on, 3 days off, 10-hour days. You spent one night a week there. And basically I directed the program that the guests would come in. They would come in, they'd stay for 4 days. I think it was 4 days or 7 days. They'd live there. They would eat totally clean. They would exercise all day long. We would go hiking all day long. And so I did that. That was my first job out. That was amazing, amazing. Then I left there and I went and I worked for Chevron Corporation, the oil company, and I did health and productivity. And then I worked in the big, tall building down in San Francisco on Market Street. And the irony is that I was able to bring all of my health and wellness to Chevron, because they were working on helping their employees be healthier, and back injury prevention and OSHA and like all this stuff. So I, for a couple years, ran around teaching back injury prevention and health promotion and running their fitness centers and stuff.
Did you leave the retreat center for this because it was a better opportunity, more money, or what living in the city versus?
Yes, to all of the above.
Those. Okay.
Yeah. The retreat center was amazing. It was a commute.
Was that Dean Ornish's retreat? Okay.
No, but Chevron is where I met Dean Ornish. So it all works out so beautifully, right? The retreat center was down the peninsula. So that was a commute back and forth, but that wasn't a big deal. But what had happened was I started working for the San Francisco Bay Club while I was working at the retreat center to make extra money. And so I was doing personal training.
I see.
Then somewhere in there, I got introduced to Chevron. And so then I left the retreat center, moved to Chevron, kept doing training at the Bay Club, did that for a while until it just got to be too much. And then I left the Bay Club and then just did Chevron. And then at Chevron, I met Dean Ornish's group and was really intrigued by that work. And that was didn't think anything of it. And then I got married, left Chevron, moved to Chicago, and then at Chicago started my first business. It failed beautifully, and then I got offered. Well, it hadn't failed yet. When I was trying to make the first business work, Dean Ornish's group was out at a hospital there, and long story short, I ended up going and being a director for their program in Illinois.
I have several questions.
I know, right?
The first one is, you met your husband in San Francisco, or okay. and then he had an opportunity to move to Chicago. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you all for it? Were you?
I was.
Let's go to the Midwest. Let's go to Chicago. Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, did you think, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a business, actually. No. And how old were you?
Let's see. So we got married when I was 27. So I would have been about 28.
So the two of you moved out there, and
Yeah.
then were you working, and then you started to percolate this business?
No. Okay. So let me think about. Sorry. I love your questions. They're making me. I got to go back in my time capsule. Okay. So we got married, and then a couple months later, we got this opportunity. So I left Chevron, and then we went out to Chicago, and then he said, and then we just said, well, let's just see what I want to do. So I got to kind of just play house for a little bit and get us settled in our home. I mean, we were newly married. Like, we were like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to be a really good wife. I'm just going to be a good wife. And so we did that for a little while. And while I was there, then I started to get bored. So I started to do personal training again. I worked in the fitness industry out in Chicago for a little while. And then I was like, you know what? Actually, I know a lot about stuff. I want to do my own thing. I'm going to design my own business. So I actually, not many people know this, but I actually started my business in Chicago for the first time. It was going to be around health and productivity. I was going to consult with businesses and bring all my wares from everything I'd learned into this new business. And what I did, Rob, was I got the website done. I did the marketing brochure. I did the cards. I got the phone number. I had my office. I had everything. And I literally got everything done. And I went like this. Okay, I'm ready for you.
Where's the business?
Like, where's the business? And nothing happened. And I was like, well, what? And I was still personal training. So when I was personal training, I would plant seeds in clients' heads, like, oh, I'm working on this thing and and it's gonna be really great. And that was it.
Yeah.
Well, nothing was happening with my business. And so I started to get really scared. And by the way, it only been like a couple months. Like, it wasn't like this big, long thing. I did not know what I know now, which was basically, you got to go get it, you know? And so I was really confused by that, you know? And what ended up happening was, while I was being confused about the failure of my business, I got offered the position to go and run the Dean Ornish program at the hospital system out there. And so I was like, of course. And I was super relieved. So I did that, went and worked for him, and shut down my business. 6 months after that happened, the seeds I had started to plant, people started to call me and go, hey, are you doing that thing now? Do you want to do it? And I was like, oh no, the business is shut down. I already shut it down. And I can remember getting the first call when I was actually at my job and going, I quit too soon. I quit too soon. But then what happened is, by the time I was 6 months into my job, I was now very, very pregnant with my son, because literally after I got the job with Ornish, I got pregnant like almost immediately. And so as soon as I had Jake, I left and I decided not to go back because I just wanted to be home with him all the time. So I actually left that job.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you got married, was it a big wedding or small wedding?
It was a sweet wedding. It was 100 people.
Okay.
It was in Palo Alto. We did it. I remember the hotel and everything we did it, but it was just closest friends and family, just 100 people.
And were both your parents there, or?
No, just my mom.
Your mom was there. Okay.
Just my mom.
And back to Chicago.
Yeah.
Who is Dean Ornish?
Oh, Dean Ornish. Okay, Dean Ornish. He's actually out in California, in Sausalito. You know who he is, right? Okay. He runs a preventive medicine research institute, and he basically is a cardiac surgeon who created a methodology where if patients were willing to do the work around it, we could reverse their heart disease. And so if they did a combination of stress management, group support, healthy eating, and exercise, and they were willing to work with us for 12 weeks, depending on where they were at in their process with whatever was happening with them, we could actually reverse it. And so we would give people the option, like, do you want to come and hang out with us for 12 weeks and we can reverse it, or do you want to have your intervention and be on drugs? And then they would make their decision.
Okay, got it.
Really, really beautiful work. Yeah, really beautiful.
And so when you had your son, and what's your son's name again? Jake. When you had Jake, you stayed at home for a bit, and then did you get back into the business?
So my ex-husband and I used to say that I'm allergic to being pregnant. And I'm also, something happens to me for the first year after a baby where the oxytocin is so high, I can't think about anything but the baby. And then year one, day one afterwards, I'm like, okay, where's my life? Like, I'm out. It's really, it happened with my daughter too. So, so about a year after Jake was born, I started to get itchy. But I really also wanted to be itchy, meaning like I was starting to want to do my work again.
Yeah.
But I also really wanted to be a really good mom. And I had this vision and this kind of fantasy of what I thought being a mom looked like. I had a picture of being what a good mom looked like. And it was a really tight picture. Like, it's not a picture that, it wasn't my picture. It was just, I got this idea in my head and I was trying to live into that. So about a year after he was born, actually more like 15 months, I remember sitting in the front seat of my car. He was taking a nap in the back. I was at the gym parking lot waiting to work out. It was July. It was totally hot. I kept the car running the whole time for the AC because I didn't want to wake him up. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, I want my life back. Like, I want me back. And so I started thinking, well, if I was going to work, what would I do? And basically I took out a pad of Post-its and I started to write everything I'd ever done that I loved in my career. So I was like, working with athletes, love this part. Working in corporate America, love this. You know, and before you knew it, my whole dashboard was lined up with like this amazing job description. And I was like, oh my gosh, who would give me that job? Well, there's no job like that. So I was like, well, what if I made the job? And then what if I made a company out of it? But then I was like, oh, but I'm a terrible entrepreneur. I tried that for 3 months. It failed. And so I had all this in my head. I went home. I went and I worked out. He woke up, worked out, blah, blah. I went home. The next morning I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I was like, I have to do this. Like, I really want to create this job. So that was it. Like, that was the beginning of this whole company. Is I was like, I want this job because the criteria I was using at the time was, what is the work that if I was doing it, it's all things that I love. It is purpose-driven. It is so purposeful for me that I can justify being away from this little guy. Like, it has to be so valuable for me to be doing this, like in terms of my own joy and pleasure, and then also in the impact I'm having on other people, that it warrants me being away from him. And that was how I designed this business, basically.
Where do you think you get your resilience from?
Probably from everything that I went through when I was little. I really
just constantly having to get
hustle.
back up, keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't perfect, but keep going,
Totally.
keep moving forward.
I honestly, I think it goes all the way back to that little fourth grader on stage. I think it goes back to being told I would never make it in the real world because I'm too sensitive. Like, that sensitivity is one of my greatest superpowers. I just have to know how to direct it and manage it, you know? And so I think it goes back to that. I think it goes back to that fourth grade experience. I think it goes back to the split with my family. You know, that was just, there's so much wisdom that came out of that. And I think that period of time was where I really started to get in touch with what is a decision, what is an intention, what is a reboot, like what is my state, you know, if how do I shift my state, and then going through college and having a ton of different jobs and having to hustle, like a lot of hustling. I think that's where I get a lot of hustling. And when I think about hustling, I think hustle finally sometimes gets like a really funny, that word gets abused, but I think about hustle as making things happen, but also doing it in a way that you love yourself throughout it.
Yeah.
So it's not just hustle to get it done. It's like, how do you balance both of those?
One thing that I feel there's a theme a little bit is, and maybe you're just not talking about it too much, but I don't sense that, I was down for 8 months and I was just in the dumps and I couldn't get myself. It just seems like you're constantly moving. But am I missing anything?
No, but you're bringing up a really important point, because I am moving, but I also have a lot of support that helps me keep moving. So there's the kind of moving where you move through grief or pain or challenge or whatever, and you just keep moving and you stay up here, right? I've done it. I've seen other people do it, stay up here, and you're not actually dealing with what's happening down here.
Sure.
That will catch up with you. And I've had that experience too, of moving so quickly and not tending to things that needed tending to, that it catches up to me and I go, oh my God, I'm stopped in my tracks, and now I actually got to go do some overhaul on myself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the way that I feel like I can do that now, and I think this is really where true resiliency comes in, is I have people in my life that when I feel that feeling where I'm like, oh, this is tender, I actually need some support here, I know who to reach out to. I know to go grab my therapist or a coach or an advisor or a good friend or my sister or whatever, to give myself permission to get the support around that thing so that I can keep moving and functioning really, really well. But I think that that's a thing, and I'm seeing a lot of this lately with this work that when I'm leading sessions, is that people think they're leading. And so as business leaders, they can't be angry, or they got to have it all together, or they can't be vulnerable, or they just got to keep going, and hustle, hustle, hustle. But what's happening is they're not necessarily tending to some of the things that might be happening that need a little bit of TLC, whether it's from 30 years ago or it just happened yesterday. And I think that us giving full permission for that vulnerability, for getting that support, for the extra nourishment that I think all of us so deserve and need to have in order to lead, I think full permission is really important there. And that's actually what will create more momentum to keep going.
Yeah. But you weren't really taught that.
No.
That's what's really cool. You know, I think
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
So I have a degree. I call it my PhD in what not to do.
Okay.
And it's a good degree. Like, I highly recommend everybody get a PhD in what not to do, or whatever you want to call it. Because the learning that I'm talking about, like, nobody taught me that. Some of the stuff I've learned has come because it's brought me to my knees. And I've actually gone to a place of surrender where I've gone, okay, like, my tricks aren't working anymore. My reboots aren't working. Like, this thing keeps coming up. I actually need some support here. And so the teaching around resilience and tending to things, that sometimes has come in the land of what not to do, which is don't go so quickly and just be tough and just keep rebooting, and just that you end up burning yourself out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's good. I love that. So you had your second child in Chicago.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I always thought your daughter was older than your son, but that's not the case.
No.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And so how long were you in Chicago? Because obviously some point you ended up back in California.
Yeah. So I had Izzy in 2005, and we were in Illinois until 2010. We came back in 2010.
You came back in 2010 as a family?
Yes, as a family.
Okay.
Yes, as a family.
And you mentioned that your husband as my ex.
My ex,
so
yes.
You're obviously not together
We're
anymore.
not together. No, we're not.
So how long has that been, and what happened?
Well, let's see. So we actually had split up in, we actually decided to come back in 2010. We'd been there for, well, I guess it was almost 11 years that we were in Chicago, and decided to come back in 2010 and come back as a family. And we were here we were doing a lot of work on our marriage when we came back. We were doing a lot of work. We had already been through some good hills before we even came back home. And we were doing the marriage therapy, we were doing all that. And we just got to the point after being back here, and it was 2014, where we looked at each other and we said, oh my gosh, there's so much love here. Let's actually complete this relationship as it is, so that we can continue to love each other and be really good co-parents, but go on with the arcs of our lives in the way that we're going.
Yeah.
So that's basically what happened. Is people always ask me, like, well, was it bad? Like, how bad was it? And then it's so funny, like, when you get married, nobody asks you, why are you getting married? Well, tell me all about it. When you get divorced, everybody needs to have their reason. Like, everybody needs to know, well, what was it that happened? Well, why did you get divorced? And really, it's a really boring answer. The reason is that we just got to the point, we'd been together for a long time. We made 2 amazing children. I got nothing but absolute love and respect for him, his family, like, for everybody. And we got to the point where it was like the marriage and us together as husband and wife, that was complete. Mm-hmm. And it was time to actually start to build a new relationship, which was just about co-parenting.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. It's really boring. It's really boring. Like, there's no drama. It's really boring.
Was there any part of you, as it started to become real, that I'm getting divorced, where you felt like, oh my gosh, my parents were divorced. Now I'm getting divorced. Like, of course,
Right.
Was there anything like that? Did you feel that way at all?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we had almost split earlier and had decided not to. And part of the reason we decided not to is because neither one of us wanted to do that to our kids. Because
Yeah, okay.
I'd been through that, and like he saw the impact on me, and so that was part of our purpose. Like, let's really work together, and then also. Like, I kind of do something for a living, which is called collaboration and impact and leadership. And so I felt an extra level of desire for us to be collaborative in figuring out, how to IEP our way through this marriage. And so when we decided to split, before we got to the point where we decided to split in 2014, I called it the Leave No Stone Unturned project, which was doing my own personal work, us doing our work together, and like really looking to see, is there any way that we can make this work in a way that feels congruent for both of us, that will model authentic energy and authentic energetic connection for our children as they grow up and they see that in relationship. Like, is there any way we can do this? Because I wanted to make sure that someday when my kids said to me, Mom, is there anything you guys could have done differently? I could honestly look at them and say, no, I promise you we did all our work. And I can, like, full body, yes, say that's true. So when we split, I still have those moments, Rob, where I'll see something and I'll go, oh God, I wonder if that's because of the divorce. I think.
Like what?
Oh my gosh, anything. Like, well, it's gonna sound really weird, but the thing that occurs to me right now is like, my kids have boycotted my food. They boycotted my food right now because, this is like such a silly thing to talk about, but it's real for me right now. Yeah. So they think that the food I make is too clean. They're like, oh, you cook organic, you're always making healthy stuff. What's up with all this soup? And they don't like that. And so at the other house, at their dad's house, they eat a little bit differently. He still cooks lovely meals for them. They're just different.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we're not eating your food anymore. We're just going to eat Dad's food. And so I'll go, oh my gosh, is this because of the divorce? Like, now I've created this issue with food with them. And so like any little stupid thing that'll come up, I find myself, my son and I will have a disagreement, or my daughter and I will get into a disagreement. And I do find myself going to a default of, is this normal teenage behavior? Or is this something that I've done in the way that I'm showing up with them around our split, So it's like that.
I feel like with any divorce or impactful thing, that it's something that could be impactful to your children. All we can do is what we know to do at that moment, and that's the best we can do.
It's the best we can do.
And my parents, same thing. It was definitely challenging when they got divorced, and I was resentful about it for years and years until I realized that they were just doing the best that they could do with the tools that they had. And
oh my gosh.
So that's
Oh, no, amen to that. Amen. I think if I've learned nothing else in the last 4 years is such a empathy for any human being going through anything they're going through. Like, I really believe we are all doing the very best we can do. And the last thing anybody, especially any parent, wants to do is to have some kind of negative impact on their children.
Of course.
And so I look back at when we were splitting up, and in the midst of it, for the longest time, for 2 years, I called the divorce a completion. I didn't even call it a divorce. So much so that when I would speak about it, I'd say, oh, my husband and I, we completed our marriage. And people would go, completed? What does that mean? And I go, oh, divorce. And they go, oh my gosh, like, are you in denial? Like, you got a divorce. I'd be like, no, I'm not in denial. It's just, it felt like a completion. Yeah. And part of my languaging around that, I think our language is so powerful. Part of the languaging, the intention behind that was that a completion to me felt like life-giving. It felt like it's completing this arc, but it's beginning something different. Yeah. And that was really important for me to carry energetically so that my kids also benefited from like this completion.
Absolutely.
Versus divorce had such a negative connotation to me. And I always grew up thinking that like there was something kind of wrong with us because my parents got divorced. So I was super protective of that. Yeah. It's a great model. It really is. It helps. Because it can be the way that you and your husband went about it. Yeah. And I'm imagining you in your office at your home and bringing him in and saying, okay, we're going to post
I've got Post-it notes, and this is how we're going to go about
Yeah.
the completion. Did that actually happen?
Well, a little bit.
We're going to outline the process.
We're going to outline the process. And here's our IEP grid here.
Yeah.
And, a little bit it did. Like, we're laughing, but a little bit it did, because we actually went through a series a couple times where we tried to redesign our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So we would sit down. We did this a couple years in a row where we'd go, okay, what do we really want? Like, what are the agreements we need to have? And we would use some of this methodology in doing that. But it only would work for a little while, because really at the end of the day, there were some things that were just out of alignment. Like, it was complete.
Yeah.
And so when it was time to complete, we went in, we used a mediator, and we went into the mediator's office, and we each had on one Post-it what we thought, what we wanted. And the core focus, the core goal of the whole thing was what was going to be most in service of our children, that would leave our children well and whole, and with two parents who lived close together. We live 4 miles apart still. Two parents who live close together, who work well together, who love them so much, so that they're as little impacted as possible. And that was our guiding light. And then our Post-its literally was like, here's what I want, here's what he wants. And we gave it to the mediator, and of course, in the state of California, the mediator goes, oh, that's really nice, but we're gonna do some due diligence. And so then you go through 6 months of like tearing everything apart and everything. And at the end, what we came in with on that Post-it was pretty much what we both walked away with. So we already had our intention. The completion of that marriage, I remember the mediator saying that it was the most intentional and collaborative divorce, one of the most intentional and collaborative divorces she had ever mediated. Mm-hmm. And we worked really hard for that. Mm-hmm. So
do you think that could be a template for other potential divorcees?
It could be. I actually wrote the IEP Survival Guide for Divorce.
You did?
I did. It's
like,
tucked away
it's on
somewhere.
the Mac somewhere, or?
Yeah, it's tucked away. A couple people have seen it. I'm going to hold on to it for a little while.
Okay.
But I'm going to hold on to it for a little while.
You did do some really wonderful things, with keeping yourselves close to each other, doing co-parenting. You had some other agreements the two of you made with the kids. I think one of the unique things that I learned was that you collaborate with your kids on your travel schedule.
Yeah.
What's that? Explain that.
That's been really life-saving. It's not as important anymore because my kids are older. I mean, they're pretty much like
Scram.
Living in their own high-rise apartments. Yes. So the way that we did, so for a long time, I struggled with what many parents struggle with, which is how do you balance having an incredibly rich life where you're doing really good work in the world with being a really good parent and partner, and those competing values. And so the way that I found that it was most authentic for me to do that was to co-design with my family when it was all 4 of us. But then even more recently, when it was just the 3 of us with the kids, to co-design, okay, guys, here's my schedule. Here's the next book that's coming up. Do I even want to do this book? Like, if I'm going to do this book, this means mommy's going to be writing until 9 o'clock at night. This means you're probably going to be eating a lot of gluten-free macaroni and cheese or whatever, and so, or not. And so just co-designing and saying, like, here's what I'm being invited to do. How do you feel about this? And et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's been really helpful. And then we would co-design travel. So I would say, okay, I can either go do 3 quick 2-day trips, or I can put them all together and I can be gone for 10 days. So what would you guys like me to do? You guys want the little quick sprints, or do you want a marathon? And they go, take the marathon, because they would rather me be gone consistently because they get in a pattern with their dad than, in and out, because it was disruptive. And so that was helpful. For a long time when we had office space and they were little, they each had their own office with little desks. Jake was the KEO, the Kid Executive Officer. Izzy for a long time was the TEO, and then Jake got promoted to the Teen Executive Officer, and Izzy moved into Kid Executive Officer. And so we did that for a little while. This was not the greatest idea, but it was fun while it lasted. We had an agreement that when I did travel, if I talked about them on stage, if they inspired a blog article, if they inspired anything, I would give them $25. And so that was great for a while, until I started to notice that every time I'd come home, they'd be like, how much money did I make this week? And then I started to feel like they were pimping me out. So I was like, we're not doing this anymore. So I would be losing a ton of money today with them. I'd be giving them a ton from this interview.
That's right. Yeah, for
but
sure.
Just little things like that. Now that they're older, their dad, so Jake lives with his dad full time. He's 18 and he's pretty much, but Izzy, we share custody with Izzy. And so we do 7 and 7. And so she's with me for 7 days and it pretty much works unless I'm traveling. And so I try and schedule all my travel. Like this week is his week. So I purposely schedule, like we do that, but he's very, very, very flexible with me around my travel, which I'm grateful for. Yeah.
It's good. And you're very aware of keeping them on a good rhythm.
I try. Yeah. I mess it up all the time.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
I do mess it up all the time. Well, with travel. With travel. So I'll have random, I try and compartmentalize it as much as possible. And sometimes it just doesn't work. Like so last weekend I was at a business retreat. They're twice a year. It fell on my week with Izzy. So she's spending an extra 2 days, However, then I came back and then I had her for 2 full weeks. So I'm really lucky that my ex is a collaborative co-parent because I know that it's not always the case at all for people. So I'd be in a lot of trouble if he wasn't.
I think it's a unique trait to be both creative and be able to execute. And you're that. Where do you think that creativity came from?
I don't know. I bet it's my happy place.
The creativity is your happy place. So when you have to actually take all this wonderful stuff and like make it into something useful, the execute part, is that your not happy place?
No, it's my very happy place. So
they're both your happy place.
I do. I feel really, really lucky. I've got a bunch of happy places. So creativity is my happy place. Execution is my happy place. It's the stuff in the middle that is not my happy place. So anything that has to do with logistics, connecting the dots, timelines. I mean, we just launched this last book. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Like, anything that has to do with that is where I get exhausted and where I've done I think I've done a nice job of making sure I have people in my company, on my team, who are really good at those things, who love those things, but who would be exhausted by the creativity. So we're really intentional about how we team and make sure that everybody's doing what's
How long
best.
did it take for you to get to the point where you realized you needed to have that kind of support structure and it wasn't like just you that could do this?
A long time, Rob. A long time. That goes again in the column of the PhD, my PhD of what, because for a long time I thought I could do a lot. So it's like a combination. 1, I thought I could do it all. 2, I didn't know I needed help. I think for a while I just didn't realize I needed help. 3, sometimes I didn't even know that there was help for what I was doing because I was so in it. Then there was the matter of, well, how do I pay for the person?
Right.
Like that's a really big thing. Like
Sure.
That's a major act of faith I take it really responsible or really to heart when somebody's on my team and now they're getting a paycheck. I want to make sure that one of our core values in our company is around abundance, financial abundance. I don't want anybody feeling stressed out about money. And so if I'm bringing someone on, how do I pay for them and make sure, and what came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you make the investment and then you create more space and now you're making more money? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a combination of a lot of things. And I think that I had a really good assistant that worked with me for 9 years and she taught me a lot about that. She passed away last year. Yeah. And magically, her amazing sister, who knew my business really well, stepped in to help me out for a couple months so that things didn't implode. And then she is so awesome that she decided to join me. So she's with me almost full time now. And so that really helped. And she's really good at the things that I suck at. But I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question. I got distracted by Gina. But it took me a long time. It took me a lot of falling down to figure out that I needed more support. And it took me a lot of realizing that I was getting tired, like I was exhausting myself, and it was really nobody's fault but my own because I did not have the right structures in place to support me. And so as soon as I started to see that, I think one of my superpowers, as many mistakes as I make, one of my greatest superpowers is I'm very willing to look at them and then go, okay, how do we create, what's next for us? And so that's where that resiliency comes in. And so I'm pretty good at finding people that are really good at what they do and then giving it to them.
At what point did you feel IEP was something? you know, where you were saying, I got something here. Like, this is my life's work.
2009.
Okay.
2009 and 2013. There's two main points. In 2009, it wasn't called IEP yet, but it was the same.
And we should
same
say what it stands for. I don't think we've done that yet.
Oh, we haven't. It's a mystery. It's the mystery.
Okay, look it up.
Look it up. Yeah, look it up. No, IEP stands for Intentional Energetic Presence, which also, so it's about how we show up in the world, you know, and being really accountable for how we show up, because we can't control what happens around us, but we control our state and how we interact with those things. And then if you break it down another way, it's your intention for what you want to have happen. It's your energy and your stamina to make it happen. And then your presence, how present you actually are, and then how you show up to make those things happen. So that's what IEP stands for. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
It's one of those things we're so close to. We're like, IEP.
Yeah,
IEP.
it just rolls off.
IEP this, IEP that. And so in 2009, before it was called IEP, I was working with a client, and I had wanted to bring the IEP work in, which basically was looking at the person, the essential you, your values, your vision, like all this. It was looking at their energetic presence. It was the soft stuff. And I wanted to bring this into this one team, and the company said, no, you can't. That's the soft stuff. We don't have time for it, with all due respect. Like, we're glad that you have that from California, Anese. That's really, really lovely, but that's not our thing. Just give us the skills. Come and do leadership development skills, feedback, communication, all this stuff. Help us work with this team. So I said, okay, and I kind of overrode it, and then I made a decision that what I would do is I would Trojan horse the content in. I would bring in little bits of it. I would sneak it into the hard skills. And after a couple months of doing this, I started getting really frustrated, because I was noticing, I'm like, I don't care how good the training I don't care how great the feedback model is, or how great they are at strategy, or whatever their magical skills are. It doesn't matter. If their intentions behind it, their energy and their presence are not clean and in service of that, they're leaving a ton of opportunity on the table. So I went back to the client and I said, look, I don't know how to get the team further without bringing in the soft stuff. So I either need to do this the way that I know congruently this is going to work for you guys. I said, or I can refer you to about 100 other coaches and facilitators that will come in and do exactly what you want. So you choose. Like, either way is fine, but ethically speaking, I can no longer proceed with this team if I don't do it the way I know we need to do it. So I said, fine, we're a couple months invested, let's go for it. A month later, so we start integrating it. A month later, the company comes to me, the sponsor of the program comes to me, and he goes, he says, you let us down. You really let us down. And I can still remember the feeling, like my body just went, oof, like I let you down. And I remember I had tears in the back of my eyes, and I said, how? You know, because I thought it was starting to go better. And he said, if you would have stood stronger for your work and what you wanted to do with us, we would have saved a couple months of pain. He goes, this is actually what we need to be doing. If you would have stood stronger in your belief about this, it would have saved us a ton of time. And that changed my life, because I went, oh, okay, fantastic. I wasn't strong enough. Like, my own knowingness was not strong enough to hold the container for them to be stronger than their doubt. And so therefore that costs us extra time. So if I'm looking at where I'm accountable for that, that was like a huge learning for me, where I went, okay, I saw this, I compromised, because they were like, oh no, it's a soft stuff. Oh, intentions, energy, presence, like, no, it's, you know, like typical. And I let that be bigger than what I sensed was from my expertise, what would help the team. So it was powerful. I went back, and I remember we had a couple other clients we were working with, and we went through and had conversations with every single one, saying, we either go back to the drawing board and we actually start with this content, or else we'll let you go, which was a really scary thing. And about a good majority came with us, but there were some people that we referred out.
Mm-hmm. This person who said that to you, do you keep in touch with that person anymore?
Not as much. Not as much.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much. Why?
Well, that person shifted something for you.
Shifted
it was
thing.
just by
I know, I'm gonna
they
have to
didn't
call
need
him
to
now.
say he didn't need to say that.
No, he didn't need to say that.
But the strength in the way he said it and the emotions that you felt caused you to change course in your approach.
I know. I'm going to have to now go and send him like a care package from Zingerman's.
That's a great idea.
Now I'm going to have to do that. I think, or not have to. Now I get to do that. It's true. Because from that conversation, well, here's the thing. We know when we're self-betraying. I knew that I was self-betraying when I said, okay, I won't integrate the work like that. We'll do it your way. Like I knew that was a self-betrayal. Now I could also justify part of that as being meet the client where they're at. Absolutely. But I knew in my system, I knew that was not the right path, and I overrode that. And so that conversation, when he came and said, you let us down, like part of the reason why I was so upset was because I knew it, And so after that, going back, that's all we start with now. So we turn work away. It actually doesn't happen that much anymore because people usually come to us now because they know what this work stands for and they know that it's the secret, it's secret sauce.
Right.
And so I don't have those conversations as much anymore, but I have turned people away because we'll say, we're going to go in. We need to start from the inside out with your team or with you or whatever it is, with your audience. We got to start from the inside out because if we don't address the human being in the center and how they're showing up and getting them clean on their intentions, their energy, and their presence, then I don't care how great the skills are, people are not going to respond to them in the same way that they would if their IEP was really clean and clear.
Yeah.
And they're also more likely to get exhausted. Because that was the other thing I started to see in 2009 was that there were 3 kinds of people that would come to this work. Or actually, it's probably a little bit later than 2009. But there was people who, they have phenomenal impact. They're making a ton of money. Their business is doing great. But they're exhausted. Their health is falling apart. Their marriages are falling apart. They haven't seen their kids. So that person's got the impact piece down, but not the self-care piece. Then you got people who are really good at their self-care, but they're totally ineffective at creating impact. So that doesn't work. Then you got people who are like really great at creating impact and really great at their self-care, but they leave dead bodies everywhere they go. And people are only working for them because they have to. And I don't think that we as human beings, business leaders, whatever our role is, I think that we underestimate the power of what happens when we're fully present, when we're taking care of ourselves, when we're totally in alignment, and we communicate any message to another human being. So that was changing.
And so
for me.
what about 2013? Because you said 2009 and 2013, which is a big span of time. So I was just curious, it really started to take off in 2009.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, something happened in between.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Okay,
2013.
good. Super good. So in 2009, it took off internally for me.
I see.
In 2009, that was my big wake-up call around, okay, this is important, this works, you got to stand for this work. If I remember having this conversation, I just had this conversation with someone yesterday, this right now, Anese, if you don't stand for this work, and if you don't stand for the way that we're talking about these things and the way they're important, then who else will, right? If I don't stand for it, then I can't get upset if it's not happening. So that was a big learning for me. Does that make sense?
It does.
And then, so that started me building out the work even more intentionally. Well, then in 2009 or 2013, the work still didn't have a name. I was calling it sustainable leadership. We were calling it Buddhist leadership.
Okay.
You remember that?
I don't remember that name.
Boots, because anyway, but it's
Buddhist.
a lot. It's a Buddhist, blending the East and the West, and I wear my boots. And anyway, there's a whole thing. There's a whole thing. But I couldn't come up with a name, and it was stressing me out. And I was like, well, I don't know what to call it, because people would say to me all the time, Anese, this isn't traditional leadership development. This isn't, this is different. There's something that you're doing when you come into a room, the way that you're working with us, which feels really, really different. What is it? And so in that period of time, I actually hired somebody to follow me around. They came with me to retreats, coaching sessions, facilitation sessions, and I had them watch me and pull out what were the common things I kept doing over and over again that I was so close to I couldn't see it. It's called modeling. So you just have somebody basically pull you apart. It was really great. And I still couldn't name it. So I go to a meditation retreat, or yoga retreat in California, my Camas Ranch, which unfortunately just burnt down last year. But I go to this retreat, and I'm laying in a yoga class, and I had decided before I went on retreat, I decided to let go of the pressure of figuring out some brilliant name. And of course, when you let go of the pressure of a brilliant name, it shows up, because I'm laying on the mat in vinyasa, or is it savasana? Savasana.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In savasana. And that retreat was on an old Indian burial ground. So I don't know if I was extra tuned in or what happened, but I literally heard and felt intentional, energetic presence. Anese, you make it so hard. Like, stop making it so hard. It is so simple. And I'm laying there and I'm like, what? IEP, intentional energetic presence. And it was so powerful that I got up and I left Savasana, I left the class to go back to my room, to go Google intentional energetic presence, to do a search on my computer. And what was really funny was that there were so many times in articles I'd written, I talked about intentional presence, energetic presence. Like, I was using these words all the time. So by the time I left that retreat, I think I had reserved a domain name for it. I'd done a couple things. I'd set a little bit of a vision, just saying, okay, what can we get done in the next 3 months with this work? I'd emailed my team and said, I think that we just named this work. We'd applied for the trademarks, that was all done. And 4 months later, we did our first official IEP Method retreat.
So cool.
It was amazing.
I don't know why I'm picturing you like in downward facing dog with Post-its or something.
I know.
I'm on the retreat. I've got the domain name.
I remember sitting on the bed, that it was a white quilt, and I was sweaty from the yoga class, and I'm sitting there and I'm like doing my thing. So
so you decided to write the book about it. Contagious, I'm not going to say it right.
Contagious Culture.
Yeah, it just popped out of my head all of a sudden. Contagious Culture.
Yeah.
And your first book.
Yeah, the
right?
first big book. Yeah, I'd written other little ones, but nothing. Yeah,
right.
But my first.
Because I remember you going through it.
Yes.
It was a huge process.
It was.
It was documented, and it was fun to watch.
Oh yeah,
it was fun to watch
on the wall. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and I enjoyed hearing stories about it, and so what did that process feel like for you, and what was it like when you actually held that book?
That process was awesome. I'm going through it again because I'm working on Contagious You. So I'm just sorting my experience now versus what it was before I had done that. The process was, so the hardest part of writing that book was actually putting together a book proposal, which, have you done that? Have you done a book proposal?
No, yours scared me away.
Oh, right, because I gave you mine. Because I gave you my book proposal.
You did, and you
you
gave me great mentorship on that, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do what you did.
Well, I don't think you needed to do it because you wrote a beautiful book without it.
Oh, thank you.
And if you ever were going to do that again, before you decide not to do something, call me and say, this scared me, and I'll talk you out of it or into it. Well, that book proposal, that actually is where so much, I mean, that thing took me probably 60 hours to put that thing together. However, once it was done, it mapped out the chapters in the order of the book. And I think I had so much content building up in me for so many years that it was just, I mean, I wrote that book in a little bit over 4 months. It was just like, just go and just get the content out.
Yeah.
And then fortunately I have a really good editor. And so, God bless her. She was very patient with me and reworking stuff. But that was, I mean, it's an incredible process to get stuff out of your brain.
Yeah.
And then to have it on paper, and then to have the books show up at my front door, and to open it and go, oh my, it's like a book baby.
That was in here.
It was in here.
And now it's in
here.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's here. These are my words, And so that was a really, really cool process. And I remember thinking it's kind of like giving birth. Because I remember after I had Jake, I was like, we're done. I don't want any more kids. I'm done. This is it.
For sure.
Like that labor whole thing, like that labor thing, that's a whole nother world. Like, I'm not doing that again. We're done. One baby is plenty. I thought I wanted 4. Like, one baby is plenty. I remember my husband was like, okay, are you sure? Yep, I'm positive. A week later, I'm like, maybe we should have another one, right? So doing a book is, and there's actually a drug, I guess, that gets released in your brain. There's a hormone that gets released in a mother's brain that makes her forget how painful the process of having a baby was, so that otherwise we would never have a second child, right? So I remember my doctor telling me that, actually, because I was like, well, now I want another baby. He's like, well, I thought you said you were never going to have one. So the book, not that it was a painful process, but it's a little bit like that, because I had it and I went, ugh. And I remember for a year after that book was done, I felt like I couldn't write anything. I felt like I had no more words. I felt like I'd milked all the words out of my brain and I had nothing left.
Yeah.
And then I started to get the little buzz again where it was like, okay, let's do another one. Because it's as much as it's like crazy making and daunting and whatever to get words on paper, I still love that feeling of after you wrestle with a paragraph or a sentence or an idea or a chapter, of having it so it feels like, okay, this is crystallized down.
Yeah, well, it shows in the book, that's for sure.
Oh, thank you.
And we're here partially in Ann Arbor. One of the wonderful things that I'm so grateful to be a part of is a very special evening to talk about the second book, which I have a copy of here, and The Leader You Will Be, an invitation. And this is an amazing book. I like, after I read it, I wanted to purchase like 100 copies and just hand them off to people. Yeah, I intend to. And you just saw this. Have you seen this? Or did you just see it last night?
Just yesterday.
That was the first time you saw this one.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful book too.
Thank you.
It's not just the words, which are beautiful, but what was in you that got you to write this one? Because this one's so different.
It's so different.
You know?
Well, first of all, thank you. I can't think. I was actually at the Roadhouse yesterday with Ari Weinsweig, and we were just catching up, and the books arrived, and we're doing the book launch party there tomorrow night, as you know. And the books, I told Marcy, who's coordinating all of it, I said, oh gosh, I have a little bit of mental anxiety about the books getting here. I want to make sure, like, will you text me the minute they get here, you know? And she comes up to me with this box and she goes, these books? You know, so they arrived when I was there and I got to open it and see them. And it feels like the perfect place in the world to be this week with you, with Ari, with Zingerman's, with everybody. Just because I feel like there's so much of this is about coming full circle. So for this one, this book actually got started in 2009. So I was facilitating, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, I was facilitating for a company. They'd asked me to come in and do focus groups on why their culture was not working out. And the way that they had done it in the past is they would go in and they would have facilitators come in and they would interview everybody for all the bad things about the company. And then they would go back out and they would say, okay, these are the changes we're going to make. And then they wouldn't do it. And this had happened 3 years in a row. So they brought me in the 4th year and they said, can you do it different? How do you want to do it? And I said, well, I don't want to interview everyone about what's not working. I want to interview about the vision for what people would like and what good looks like. So I worked with that company. It was a huge company. And what we ended up doing, or what ended up happening, is I was in Chicago at the time, and I had flip charts all around my office, like literally wallpapering the office of all the, I think we run 4 different focus groups. And I had all the data around me. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and that was also when my kids were a lot younger, and I was reading a lot of books to them, a lot of like Dr. Seuss and Berenstain Bears and how do dinosaurs do this and do that, and you know, there's a lot. So I was already kind of immersed in children's cadence, and I was sitting there and I'm hopped up on Diet Coke and M&Ms, which is my drug of choice when I am completely pushing against every edge I've got, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got to be, you know, there to present at 9 o'clock. And that was how I would manage it then. I would do it very differently now, but that's how I used to do it. And I'm sitting there and I sit back at my desk and I look around and all of a sudden I just go, how does a leader inspire the folks? Does he shut down and grimace and say, nope, 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 nope? And it started sarcastically. And I was thinking about all the bad behaviors I'd been hearing about as I was searching for what is the dream behavior. And so the beginning of this book is the download that I got. And I say download because this will happen because I've written other ones like this for different topics, but it'll happen where all of a sudden it just comes into my brain and it comes out of my heart. And I've got like 20 minutes to catch it. And if I don't catch it in 20 minutes, it is gone. And so I started and I, you know, did like, no, they don't do this. And then I went, what do they do instead? So then I started to go, well, here's behavior that would actually look really good. And then I wrote the little poem and I went, oh, cool. And I put it away. And I shared it a couple months later with the sponsor who brought me in for that. And he was like, oh my gosh, did you write that for us? And I said, well, you guys kind of inspired it, you know? And then that was it. I put it away. He goes, what do you do? Or he asked me then, he goes, what do you do with a poem like that? And I said, I have no idea. And he goes, well, put it away and think about it. So I put it away and think about it. And I am in touch with him still. In fact, he's going to be so happy about this. And so I don't know that he knows that this is happening. I got a lot of phone calls to make after this interview today, Rob. So I put it away. So then that was it. I kind of didn't think about it. And then over the years, I would add a little bit to it, and then I would perform it, or I would share it with an audience. And every single company that I shared it with thought that I wrote it specifically for them and their issues. But I didn't really think anything of it. I just kept putting it away, because I've never thought of myself as a poet. Like, I still don't think of myself as a poet, but I didn't think that this was actually something to distribute. I just thought it was like just this thing I did.
Yeah.
And so then about 2 years ago, I went to a writing retreat with one of my writing mentors, and I read this to her, and she went, why is that not out in the world? Like, what are you doing sitting on that? That's almost irresponsible. And I remember I started totally crying. So I was like, I don't want to be irresponsible. And I'm like, do you think it's good enough? And she goes, you need to do something with that. And so then I got serious about it, went back, looked at it again, built in some more around it, around what I believe today and what I've seen over the last 10 years since I originally wrote it. And then I started performing. I memorized it. You saw me perform it in May.
Wow.
And we had so many people
Standing
asking.
ovation, by the way.
Standing ovation. I know, that was so nice. That was
really
so
special.
Sweet. But we had so many people ask for it. I didn't want it just floating around on a PDF. I wanted to do something special with it. And so we decided to craft it into a book. And what was really special about this one is that, so this poem is called The Leader You Will Be, an invitation. There's another one that I've written that's called The Ex You Will Be, an invitation. And that's about divorce or breakups.
Okay.
And it's also quite lovely. We got to figure out when we're going to do it and how. Then there's one that's called The Teacher You Will Be, which I wrote for education. And all of these get written at 4 o'clock in the morning when I wake up after I have been immersed in something that has been inspiring to me or been incredibly heartwarming, either painfully so or beautifully so, like either one. And they can only be written if they're totally authentic and if there's no forcing in them. The minute I try and force it or get clever, it's gone. But if I allow it, then they happen. And so when I went to my team with this, we looked at, do we want to go through a big publisher, or what do we want to do? Because I wanted it to be special. And I have a really great creative director. His name's Jeff Lear. He's been with me for 6 years, maybe 7. He designs everything that you guys see out there. And he's really good at, he cares so much about this stuff. And so he wanted to design it. And we looked into publishing with a bigger publisher, and we decided that wasn't the route to go for this. We wanted to maintain the creative rights around it. I wanted to be, this is where my control freakness actually really does serve. I wanted to be totally in control of the creative process, the typography, the pronoun usage. If you look at this book, or you'll notice there's a very intentional blend of pronouns.
Oh, yeah.
There's intentional blend of the pictures. Down to the little ant that's on one of the pages. Like, every single thing that is in this book has come from a place of love and intention. And it was important to me that stuck. So,
yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say, which is really delicious, is that the team got to do it. So Sandy Martini, who's our main director of, we call her, she's the director of all P's. So, programming, people, public, all the P's. Sandy handles all the P's. And then Jeff and I, this basically, I wrote it, but then they ran with it and designed it, and she managed it. And so it's truly a team thing.
Well, it's beautiful. And, the talk you gave at the Small Giants conference, it kind of just hit me when you mentioned it. And I'm thinking back to the 4th grader who had to give this speech with the oily hair. And, it was the first time I saw you. I didn't mention this to you at the conference, but I've seen you talk plenty of times. I actually thought you were a little nervous, but not in a bad way. And actually, when you did this on stage, in a really really beautiful way, actually. So it wasn't a bad thing. And And so here it is full circle, from that fourth grader to this poem that's, for adults, but it's written like inspiration from Dr. Seuss and many of the others when you were kids. And it's beautiful. And you are a beautiful person and a light in my life. I'm so grateful to you for being a part of my life and all the unique interactions that we get to have together because we're in different places and doing different things all the time. And I think you and I maybe have talked, or I thought it in my head that it's kind of a funny, unique relationship that we have started where we'll text each other videos and funny whatnots or just voice messages and things of that nature, yet we don't physically spend that much time together, ever have. Yeah. And so to be able to sit down with you today for a couple hours and, you allowing me to ask you some of these questions and learn so much more about you. Thank you. I know so many people will gain from your wisdom. Aww. You're a beautiful person. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. You're one of my favorite people in the world. You're I think pretty much the only person I would ever do a video with and send you videos of me with bronchitis or whatever. We have like our relationship is really special. So thank you for everything you bring me, and also thank you for believing in me. Like you have been in this with me from a very early point in time with this, and I can remember all the way back to when we first met, and just your championing and your care for this work and your care for me and your care for every human being you come in contact with. I just feel really, really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're a special light in this world.
You're a special light in this world.
All right, now we get to hug it out.
Oh, right. Now we can move these?
Yep.
All right.